Welcome back. This is module number 5 in our series about data analysis and visualization in Excel. We'll do this in 2 parts. And the entire module is about the DAX language. We already started in previous modules to see some of the basics of the DAX language, but we'll go deeper in this one. And I just want to tell you up front that even the depth that we're going to cover in this one is not going to be enough for you to do real work unless you check other sources and that we will provide. And maybe also we will record other modules specifically about the DAX language. But for now, let's start to see. I'm going to use the same model that I used in a previous module. And I'm going to start by going right there into the Manage window. Remember, we have this sales table that doesn't have the revenue or the cost calculated. So I'm going to, again, calculate it as a calculated column, the revenue. So I'm going to do equals quantity times this price and rename this column to be revenue. Once I have such a column, remember, this is a calculated column. It uses a context we call the row context, so it can use all the other columns in the same row, and it can also use other columns in other tables, provided that there's a relationship between this table on the many side and the other table on the one side. So this is calculated columns. Based on regular columns or calculated columns, I can create measures. Measures, I can do it from here, or I can do it, and I will show you later, directly from the pivot table. So once I have revenue, let's say I can create tot revenue, colon, equals sum of revenue, close parentheses. So now I have myself a measure that I will be able to use in the pivot. But I want to show you an alternative way to calculate actually the same number. And this is a way that will not even require me to add this calculated column to do the multiplication for each row. Because what we do here is for each row, I multiply the order quantity with the list price. But I can actually have a function, a measure, that will do this multiply for each row in just one shot without requiring a special calculated column. So let's do tot revenue take 2 as a measure, colon equal. And now I will use, instead of the sum function, the sum function is a simple function that's very similar to the sum function in Excel. Just takes all the values and sum them. But now I'm going to use a SUMX function. The SUMX function is part of a family of functions in DAX, together with the average x, count x, mean x, max x, and so on, that their nature is that they expect a table as their first argument. And once they get a table, they start iterating on the rows of this table, and for each table applying an expression that is going to be the second argument, and then applying something to the totals of all these expressions. In this case, SUMX will just summarize the results of these expressions. COUNTX will count the results that are not null. Average will average them, and so on. So this is the SUMX on the fact internet sales table. And the second argument, as I said, is an expression. And this expression is very similar to the one we just did on in the calculated column, because it actually goes on each row and calculates exactly the same thing. Order quantity times the price list, or list price, as I called it. Okay, I click enter now, and I will format it. And right here, you can see that these two are actually returning the same value. If I'm going back to Excel and create myself a pivot and use both of them, you see that actually there's no need to use both because they are exactly the same. Only one is using a calculated column and summarizing the results of the calculated column, while the other is doing this multiplication while it's being calculated as a measure. So if I add to it any, let's say, I don't know, a country, you see that this value just repeats itself. The total revenue, oh, that I misspelled total revenue, doesn't matter. It's exactly as the second one, only calculated in two different ways. All right, that's one example of using a slightly more complex DAX expression. Let's do the other measures right there from the pivot. So once I am in the field list for the pivot tables, first of all, I can see the calculated, the measures right here with a special icon designating them as measures. This is new for Excel 2016. You will not see this icon in 2013. And also you will not be able to do what I can do here, which is right click and edit or delete the measure. So manipulating the measure from the field list is new for Excel 2016. So what I can do is also from here, from the table, I can add a measure. So let's add a measure that is going to be revenue all countries. The revenue all countries, its purpose is to give me the total for all countries regardless of the context. So if I use it for Australia, it will give me all countries. If I use it for Canada, it will give me all countries. Why do I need it? You'll see in a moment. I will not use it directly in the pivot, but I will actually use it in some further calculations. So in order to do that, I will introduce for the first time a function which is maybe the mother of all functions in DAX, called calculate. It's very useful. It can start very easy and gradual, but it can actually become, in some advanced usages it's not that easy to master. So I will recommend really to start using it gradually and then learn more about it from the resources we're going to provide. So the calculate, as you can see, expect two parameters. The first is an expression. So an expression, I can give it an expression that I already calculated, the total revenue. Either one, doesn't matter which one of the two. I have two options to actually calculate the same, as we saw. Now, from this position on, it accepts a series of filters, and these filters can apply changes to the context. So, as I said in this example, I want to actually calculate the sales for all countries, regardless if which country is currently being filtered by the context. So the way to do that is to do all, use the function that's called all, which will say, forget about what's in the context for this specific column of country. So calculate total revenue based on all countries. I can check this formula for syntax, and it's okay. I can also give it a format from here, currency with 2 decimals, and now I have the new one. Now I will add it to the pivot just to understand it, not because really it's very useful to use in the pivot, because its purpose is not to be used directly in the pivot, but rather to be used in another calculation that will come in a moment. But let's see it for now. When I add it to the pivot, and let's just take one of the two identical ones out because they don't add anything. So when I add it to the pivot, what you see is that it doesn't matter what is in the row for country, this measure always returns the total for all countries. Now, it does respond to other filters. It's not that it's oblivious to any filter. So if I, for example, put the year like this, you'll see that the revenue for all countries is showing a different value for each year. So it does respond to other filters. It just actually does not respond to the change between Australia, Canada, and so on between the countries. It always returns the total of countries. Let us take it out from the pivot because, as I said, we will need it for another calculation and not directly. So from here, I will go and add another measure, and this one is going to be called % from all countries. And here I will say that I want to use the tot revenue, this one, divided by the one that we just calculated, that's called revenue from all country. So we do one divided by the other. Actually, instead of using the operator for divide, it's better to use a function in DAX called divide. The reason that it's better because this is a safe divide, that if the denominator is 0, it will return blank and not give us any weird results. So I can check the formula, it's okay. And now if I add this one to the I forgot to actually format it. So let's say that this is a number and it's actually a percent and with 2 digits. All right, so now we see for each country how the percent for this country is from the total. We divided the actual revenue, which is calculated by the context, which include the country, with a measure that ignores the country. So it actually, for the grand total, it gives us 100%. And it's true that you can actually do something like that in the context of the pivot, show as the percent from the total. But by doing this with Excel, with the DAX formulas, we can get far beyond what we can do actually by using just the features of the pivot. And you will see later on examples in which the calculate function will become more and more complex and do more sophisticated stuff. So in this part, we actually covered the beginning of the calculate function. We saw a use of the SUMX function as a representative for the family of the X functions together with the countx and so on, average X. And we started to feel the power of the DAX language, more in the second part.